Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video, first presented on live YouTube to you because you're watching. Thank you. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, anyone interested in surviving as a Pilates instructor, and anyone interested in the use of core new tension. So I think I have 4 titles today, and the others were all so heavy I thought I'd just introduce my understanding of a word or a way that I use the word, and that's a translation. A translation is where you go so much in one direction that you can't go any further in that direction, so you have to go wide. You go so long, you can't get any longer, so you have to translate your movement into a different direction. That's how I mean that. And so, coordination. The legs go out so far, and when they can't go out any farther, they open. And when they come together to the point where they can't get any more together, and they close. Those are translations. The same is true of the backstroke, which is really an evolution of the coordination from flat on the floor to elevated up on a chair or a platform, further away from center, right? So, backstroke is an expression of coordination, and whereas ideal, Pilates as a pattern that expresses an ideal. In coordination, first of all, I want to back up and say, in hundreds, you use straight arms down into hundreds. Because you don't get to a bent elbow until coordination. Just my take on things and when things happen in the sequence. And in coordination, it's about controlling this plane and then this plane, right? It's in the planes. But in the backstroke, you're taking the in the planes and taking it into rotation. See that? Flexion, extension, rotation, torsion. Pattern of movement. And it's progressive, it's complexity. And it's in those moments of translation where you go as far as you're going to go in one direction, and if you're going to keep going anywhere, it translates into another direction. Okay? And the more articulate you get, and the more refined you get in your translations, the smoother and more dynamic and the more articulate the expression becomes. So that was the first one. And I got a number more because transitions was going to be, that's 1, this is 2. So number 2 is, for me, Pilates begins with the experience. And then number 3 is quantum Pilates, and that's all I had was 3. And then a summary about, does an author mean their words? So I finished number 1. Translations are just when movement translates from going in one direction to another. And then number 2, for me, Pilates begins with an experience. That's why when you have someone who's very smart and going to ask you all these questions to get to a satisfied intellectual conclusion of what it is, see, that can't happen And you know why? Because it takes more than just mind to get to the experience that we're talking about. And the experience we're talking about, right? Joe's words, complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, right? But see, it's tough to remember back when I knew nothing of Pilates, but to actually consider what has been a lifetime of Pilates since then is the experience. Relating to the experience and then wanting more of it, wanting it right in the palm of your hand. See, wanting control of it, wanting understanding of it, wanting confidence of what you were doing and how you were doing it and what you were aiming for, all of that. But see, there wouldn't be any of that interest if there wasn't the experience. Right? And so, as an instructor, you know, I encourage you to keep in mind that it's not an intellectual thing at its core, at its essence, inside a particular sphere of interest. It's about the capacities of the human being in body, thinking, and listening becoming fully coordinated, or being, state of being. And so the person that tries to open your head and ask you questions like they're going to get to an answer about what Pilates is, when you know right off the bat that it's not the mind alone that can communicate the essence of what Pilates is, because it's the experience of the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. I mean, I have stood in front of people and explained that. But even then, they have as good a definition as I can come up with over a lifetime of fascination with Pilates, and yet still they're asking questions because, yes, they're curious, and it's always good to know more and expand more, but because Pilates is experiential, right? It's an experience. And it's when you want Pilates, whatever that is, in the palm of your hand, and especially when you can turn around and share it with others and have such a profound impact on people's lives in meaningful ways, you know, often right there on the definition between pain and pain-free, right? And then how do you get out of pain, and then how do you stay pain-free? So that's what I have to say about the first title, is recognize for yourself and for others and people that seek to get to whatever the secret is about Pilates or your teaching style, is that, you know, it's communicated through an experience because it is an experience. And the results of the conditioning part of it is the choreography that makes its impression in the aftermath of it all. Right? Like, why do I do Pilates? I do it to disappear into the moment, body, mind, and spirit, completely coordinated. And I do it because I can reach for an ideal in my head, and my thinking, in my mind. I'm trying to idealize an effort. So that can completely absorb my mind, and yet it can't just be my mind directing something because I'm fond of saying alignment is perceptible. That's a refined statement to the fact that reality is sensational. I mean, we sense reality. And what's great about core new tension is that it really gives you a sensation of alignment. Oh, I see what I had the words replicate and duplicate. It's like, can I get that experience again? And I'm coming back. When can I have my next appointment? And how often do you really recommend I do this? I have all the time and money, so what do you think? Now, rarely is that the case, but it's important to know that in order to really pursue something, you have to become familiar with it, I think. And to become familiar with something, there has to be some kind of a repetition to it. And the more routine the repetition, the more often you do it, the more synergetic it gets. The deeper you can get at it because the more familiar you are with it. So my number 2 is survival. And survival 2-1 is in looking for having Pilates in the palm of your hand, right? Having control of it, like just the palm of your hand. Pilates for me starts with the word Pilates, and that takes me to a person's name. We're in a time continuum and things are happening sequentially, so I have a better handle on things if I understand the sequentiality of what's coming down when trying to understand something like Pilates. So the man, Joseph Pilates, had a method he called contrology. Everybody that talks about Joe that knew him called him a survivor. Everybody that I met. And they meant it very sincerely and substantially. That Joseph Pilates was a survivor. And so, survival. What does survival take? Well, survival takes observation. Right? You have to be looking. You have to be aware. You have to be listening to your senses. And then with something called foresight, or looking ahead, or seeing how stuff happens that you could have been prepared for and weren't. See? I think the experience is the teacher that preparation and conditioning is a good thing. And in the pursuit of that, idealizing the target helps me embrace it, or get lost in it, or find the experience of being totally present, where I feel really coordinated in body, mind, and spirit. 2-2 is surviving. You know, you think about a subject and just think about that subject in different from different points of view. And when it comes to survival and Pilates, will Pilates survive? Well, Pilates will always survive, at least a version of it that will be supported by people that at least don't have to worry about surviving monetarily off of their profession or off of their teaching as a Pilates instructor. Right? Where money's not an object, Pilates will always survive among those who don't have to worry about surviving. There. That was pretty well said, I think. And will be interpreted and presented in a way that reinforces that survival. And so there will always be those who have a lot of money and those who are aristocratic, right? And that will always be part of the Pilates culture. And even more so because money came into the picture and Pilates was so easily commercialized into income streams that then have an influence on a filter on what Pilates is based on which side of the bread is buttered for you. Surviving the shakeout. Now, shakeout I grew up with and through the business world as when an industry gets saturated, there's only so many that are really going to survive, and the rest are shaken out, right? The Pilates shakeout. And so in this tsunami of Pilates passion that I think we're still in the near-term wave of, a lot of what's taken up in the wave are studios, or that's what's in the wave, are studios and instructors, and they're everywhere because it's all part of that wave. But they can't possibly, if human nature applies within the Pilates culture, and there's no reason why to expect it won't, that in the shakeout that happens when saturation occurs, I'm making this broadcast to you, hoping to help you survive in that shakeout by what? Two things from Michael Miller. The ideal within the Pilates, that's one thing, and biomechanically core new tension. And you don't have to care anything about Pilates to fall in love with core new tension and apply it to your own movement or however you teach anyone else's movement. Right? But those two things, those are the only two things I'm broadcasting, and to the extent that you have familiarity with those two things and can say, yeah, I can at least explain it to you. I don't agree with it, but I can explain it to you. I can even make both of them sensational so that you can say, oh, I feel that. So we're talking about survival, and if it hasn't already happened, where Pilates has just dissolved into meaninglessness. I was talking to a person that done Pilates early in their life throughout their professional life, and lamented at how infrequently she ever came across a Pilates body, just from appearance, which is what that refers to, I think. 2-2. And then 2-3 was, okay. This is a little footnote about surviving, and it's a comment about shoulds The word should, S-H-O-U-L-D. A should is a disguised want. And as soon as you hear the word should, if you replace it with the word want, things become much clearer on a lot of different levels. When someone says to you, you should do this, you really should. That is a presumption that the person saying should knows what's right, and that by doing what they recommend, you're doing what's right, which is external. That's like pointing to an obvious right. They know it's right, and you should do that in order to be right too. We could go on that for a long time. Just remember that shoulds are disguised wants. And especially if someone's saying to you, you should do this, replace the word should with want, and get a clearer picture, a freer picture about your ability to choose what you want to do, and that someone telling you you should is presuming that they know better than you do. All right. And then there was it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be so hard to find an apartment. It shouldn't be prices so expensive. This shouldn't be that. This shouldn't be that, right? When you're saying about the world should, you're saying you have an expectation of the way you want the world to be, and you're disappointed that it doesn't live up to your expectation. Let's go to number 3, which is quantum Pilates. So quantum I'm taking from the word quantum physics. And quantum physics is the area that is state-of-the-art, asking the question, why is all this happening? So it's talking about reality and what makes up reality. What makes something real or not real. All of that. That's a great discussion, and I highly recommend Nick Herbert's book called Quantum Reality for 2 reasons. Because it's a great book about state-of-the-art physics and how there's 8 popular interpretations on what makes reality what it is, and none of them are, it seems, provable. So there's a lot of theory going around, and that's fascinating. But what's even more fascinating to you as a Pilates instructor is that if Joseph Pilates came back to life right here sitting in front of me, I'd be tongue-tied, I'm sure. But if it were at the point where he wanted to report on what had happened since he'd gone, assuming he wasn't watching from somewhere else the whole time, right? But I think I would be so excited to share with Joe that quantum physics is in this position that it's in, looking at the nature of reality the way it does, because it so interleaves into body, mind, and spirit. See, so Joe says, right, contrology, complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, right? MMP interprets spirit as the observer, okay? But here, Joe again, his words, always keeping in mind, always keep your mind wholly concentrated on the purpose of the exercises as you perform them. This is vitally important in order for you to gain the results sought. Otherwise, here's the clincher. See, otherwise, there would be no valid reason for your interest in contrology. Vitally important. Keep your mind wholly concentrated on the purpose of the exercises as you perform them. What Joe does here is he's talking about the mind, and the mind wholly concentrated on the purpose of the exercises. I guess I'm suggesting and promoting the view that part of that concentration has to be in listening to your own sensation as part of the pursuit of the performance of the exercise, right? And so, in quantum physics, it seems, all of it is fundamentally about the observer and the relationship of the observer to what is observed. And so, to me, telling Joe, my opinion is that he tapped into the fundamental conditioning response of a human being to the physics that it finds itself in. See? And I tell him that everybody in the world, for the most part, knows the word Pilates and is passionate pursuit of it in whatever form they're finding it, because who knows why? Maybe they like the spelling of the word. But it comes back to my first point about the experience, and whether you know how the experience is happening or why the experience is happening or what the experience is. Just any kind of rudimentary exposure to anything that has the ideal within it is going to resonate, and people are going to want that experience. So quantum Pilates quantum physics is all about Pilates. And Pilates, I should say it this way, because quantum physics is about a lot of stuff. But I'm talking about Pilates to you as a Pilates instructor, and I would suggest that you at least listen to and hear it go by that a lot of Pilates is in quantum physics. Now, you may not want to hear that, and you may rather want to interpret Pilates as a tradition of movement like other traditions that you can point to. And that's true, of course. And yet, in Joe's own words, just from his book, you can get to an experience that underpins and supports everything else. My opinion. And if I can, I'm sorry if this is too vague or abstract. The weird thing from my reading, I don't understand all of it, but that quantum physics has a great way of predicting an answer and no clear understanding of how it gets there. And when you can get a student into an experience of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, it may be totally a mystery, ultimately a mystery as to how that happens. But again, I point to the fact that as a Pilates instructor, you don't have to explain what spirit is as the listener or listening, as a capacity compared to thinking. And it can all be within the brain. It can all be part of thinking. But meaning that what you're listening to when I do this and you have sensation, that might be at the amygdala and the hippocampus and fundamental reptilian sensory inputs of ours as human beings that are somehow differentiable from thinking, period. So what you sense and what you think about what you sense, maybe that's it, are capacities that we're trying to coordinate. And I don't know how many generations it's going to take to show up, but people are truly looking for why is Pilates what it is when they come across the connection of spirit to the observer in quantum physics and see how observation is taken to mean, in some views, the actual creation of the reality, meaning it's not real unless you observe it. So that's like Joe's words. Unless you're fully concentrated on it, you're missing the point. Right? And in quantum physics, a whole view of reality is that if you're not observing it, whatever that means, it doesn't exist. So, quantum Pilates. Michael Miller Pilates will underpin all interpretations to the extent that the ideal within MMP that MMP points to resonates with whatever else is out there. There's 10,000 ways to look at Pilates. Many of them are highly personalized, and almost all of them aren't talking about Pilates so much as what they more subjectively make of movement, without being limited by Pilates being anything in particular. Now I'm at the ending, or read between the lines, see behind the curtain, add 2 and 2. So, I talked about translations, movement going in one direction that translates into another, usually at 90 degrees, but not necessarily. I talked that for me, the beginning of Pilates, my life, my history, my connection to Pilates is experiential. And there are many that won't even go down that way because they prefer to stay all intellectual. But survival comes to mind then in response to that. And so that's why I talked about survival. And how I had 3 points on survival. Who, why, where does all this come from? That's Joe as a survivor, survival method, and to survive, you have to observe, and you have to anticipate. And in the preparation of anticipation, idealization maximizes the effort put into the preparation, the training, the conditioning. You know what I'm saying? And then survival is a shakeout. If you got to make yourself distinctive, you could say whatever you want to bad about the messenger. I'm not sure there's all that much really there, but a lot of people like to sling mud. Doesn't matter. It's the message that you want to have in hand, and I would use that to your advantage. I was summarizing, and then quantum, reality. Joe would be so jazzed that physics is so alive with the speculation of how the observing, figures into reality to the point of maybe creating it. Right? Has to do with that biocentric biology you're seeing now, talked about, I think, some of that. All right. So my summary was, does the author mean his words? And Pilates is made into a lot of things. All right, there, and I gotta go. Pilates is like sugar. If you want to workshop communication of this idea, give everybody a packet of sugar. It's great. It's great because everybody has a packet of sugar. It's something physical. It's in their hand, and they already know what it is, pretty much. Even if they're in different countries, the word pretty much translates. But you say, what is this? It's like, what is Pilates? Well, what is this? And they say, well, it's sugar. And I say, okay, you're telling me it's sugar, and that's intellectually you're telling me it's sugar, but how can you be sure? What can make you more sure that it's sugar? You know, and depending on how much of a mess you want to make or whether you want to go there, you open it up a little bit, and you taste it. See? And that's this. That's sensation. That's, I can taste that, and yes, that is sugar. Pilates is a beautiful gift because it's all about deepening your connection sensationally in the reality that you're in. And that's whether you're creating it or it's created around you. So if an author means his words, sugar. And then the extension of that, or the finish of that, Pilates is sugar. Now, a lot of people do a lot of things with sugar. And they bake with it, right? All kinds of things, they use it. All kinds of ways. But the way in which they're using it doesn't change sugar. It's, oh yeah, I also said, so what's it made of? It's sugar. Okay, now we agree, it's sugar. Now, what's it made of? What do you mean, what's it made of? It's just sugar. Which it is. I mean, you could talk about a chemical structure, right? But beyond the chemical structure, there isn't any, it isn't a mixture of anything other than that molecule, right? That thing, that's sugar. Sugar is sugar. And Pilates, from my point of view, is Pilates. And whatever you do with sugar, sugar still stays whatever it is and whatever you mix it in with. Just like Pilates stays Pilates if it's really Pilates, if it's sugar, no matter what it's mixed in with. Which goes to the question of, is bad Pilates better than no Pilates? That's a good one for someone that has a real attitude about who should or shouldn't be doing Pilates. or when they should or shouldn't be doing Pilates. Is bad Pilates better than no Pilates? And it hurts. It hurts me to even ask the question, because having done my share of teaching, I cringe at how hard it is to undo bad Pilates and make it better, rather than starting from scratch. But there's just, where do you start it? You don't start with bad Pilates and get better. I think Joe meant what he wrote, and I hope that Michael Miller Pilates gives you a point of view uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. That's the best I can do on a definition for the ideal within Joe's original work. So if my definition doesn't reflect Joe's original work, then there's something wrong. And if I miss something, well, I miss something. But for right now, and for a lot of years now, that's my synthesis of the definition of the ideal. And to the extent that you can say that word for word, even if you can't remember what any of it means, someday it will matter. Just like being in Paris at a luncheon and having a French film director with major film credits tell me he's going to make a Pilates film, and they're going to use French models in the film. And of course, you laugh and I laugh, because you just don't take somebody, anybody, and go have it do or represent good Pilates, right? And I was really getting dismissed. Actually, I wasn't even getting dismissed. I just didn't matter. And this conversation was going on with the studio owner and the money and the director, and then somewhere, I guess I got asked about my background or my education, and yes, I have a Jesuit high school boarding high school background. But that background amazingly changed the relationship I had with the director, because he was exposed to the Jesuits as well. Now that's more curse than blessing maybe, but it was the familiarity with the ideology, or theology in that case, that made a bond between us. And this symbol here, Cornu, maybe isn't ubiquitous, but there are key players around the world that are aware of Cornu and of Michael Miller Pilates, and hopefully that is some of what I leave to you as a survivor of me, is that connection to others out there that are familiar with MMP and know about Cornu tension. And the smarter you are, well, I shouldn't say it that way. Michael Miller Pilates is just one view of Pilates among thousands. And I just have such fun sharing it with you. I don't mind embarrassing myself on a live broadcast that I leave around to be viewed later. Life can't move forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2. Direct your own thinking. Geist.